disappointed.
I think that made the discussion very lively. But I will not make any comments on what Dr. Rajiv Kumar has said, because I'm sure when we get into the Q&A, there would be some questions posed to him. But very briefly, some comments nevertheless. One is what was quoted by Professor Mohapatra. He quoted the Russian minister, deputy foreign minister, that BRICS has no ideology and agenda. The Russians have become very allergic to the word ideology after the fall of the Soviet Union. So I think what they really mean is that it's pragmatic. And about the agenda, I don't know in what sense they mean it, because there's an agenda. And Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia mentioned the 23 mechanisms and all the meetings that are envisaged and the huge joint statement that we made. So there is an agenda, whether it is superfluous, whether it's meaningless, irrelevant, that's a different matter, but the agenda is there. Now, when I was listening to Mr. Mark Reinhardt, I was waiting for him to use the word IPSA, and he didn't use it. Ambassador Bhatia did, because that was also our concern when this whole BRICS thing was pushed by the Russians. But as you know, when IPSA was first formed, and again I had some kind of a role in that, there was a pressure by China to come in, and Russia too, because nobody likes the idea of South-South cooperation. And this was a novel step by these three countries. So since they couldn't sabotage IPSA directly, so in a sense they have succeeded in reducing IPSA to some degree of irrelevance. But I agree entirely with Ambassador Bhatia that IPSA has its own role to play. It was intended the intentions behind it were very different, and it was supposed to be symbolic of a genuine South-South cooperation agreement. And initial conversations did produce some ideas, but then I think it has been overtaken by BRICS, especially with the addition of South Africa. Now, insofar as the future of BRICS, I think when the SCO, for example, was formed, nobody paid much attention to it. But SCO now has become fairly relevant in its own region. So initially one may have all these doubts and concerns about the relevance of BRICS and what holds it together, and is there a glue at all. But I can't see, notwithstanding what Dr. Rajiv Kumar has said, that the countries which are members can risk BRICS falling apart. It will be a huge setback to efforts by a section of the international community to try and forge partnerships which seek to change the balance in global relations. And if this fails, then I think that agenda will be completely sidelined. And I can't see META or whatever else, Mexico and Indonesia or Turkey and all, either capable or wanting to play such a role of changing the balance in the global system from a political point of view, or from a geopolitical point of view. Insofar as the fears of China dominating BRICS are concerned, it's yes and no. It is quite clear that in terms of sheer economic power, China, with its $3.8 trillion reserves and the other attributes in terms of it being the largest exporter and the second largest economy in the world, has a huge weight within BRICS. So when the figure of 25% of global FDI going into these countries, or other figures that you mentioned about BRICS, a large part of it is attributable to China. But there is Russia, and don't underestimate the self-image of Russia and the capacity of Russia, which is standing up to the United States and the European Union in a powerful way to accept Chinese domination so easily. Russia has the capability of defending itself. It is a very strong nuclear power. Yes, it has economic weaknesses, but it's sitting on huge resources. Of course, it has a demographic problem, and it needs huge amounts of Western technology, which it can't get from China, to upgrade its industrial infrastructure. In this regard, Germany is a key country for Russia. But Russia is naturally playing geopolitical games because it's under huge pressure from the West with the expansion of NATO and the European Union. And it has to find some ways of geopolitically balancing this. And therefore, they have become closer to China. And the earlier resistance that Russia had of allowing its huge natural resources to fuel further China's rise and allow China to harness those resources, those inhibitions have broken down, partially because of Western pressure. And I don't think even India will allow China to dominate. In any case, BRICS is relatively a minor organization in terms of India's overall relationship or China's overall relationships or Russia or Brazil, which is very much central to what's happening in Latin America. So the fact that even if China was dominant in this organization, common sense would dictate, doesn't mean that all your other options have been closed. Yes, okay, within this organization, because of their financial power, they may have extra weight, but that doesn't change the overall scenario because all our eggs are not going to be in the BRICS basket. I think Ambassador Bhatia made some very pertinent points. But there's one issue on which I told him I would forewarn him I would disagree with him. It's about the conduct of Russia and not following norms and rules and laws. Just imagine Russia collapsed, the Soviet Union collapsed, and virtually no blood was spilled. Here is one of the two superpowers of the world losing huge amounts of territory and population, with 20 million Russians stranded outside the borders of Russia. And yet, no bloodshed, no ethnic conflict, nothing. But NATO kept expanding, EU kept on expanding. And these repeated declarations by the Americans that Ukraine must be part of NATO, Georgia must be part of NATO. In other words, goading Russia constantly, geopolitically. And Russia was compelled to react when the Georgian president was encouraged to start a conflict with Russia, but the Western world disregarded those lines and red lines of Russia. And there was a huge provocation in Ukraine, compelling the Russian to react. All this while, Putin has been in power for 14 years. He has not behaved irrationally or irresponsibly. If bloodshed is being, if blood is being shed all over the world, if states are being bombed and societies are being destroyed, and there's such misery heaped upon populations, large number of populations, who's responsible for this? Not Russia. Even in the Ukraine, virtually, Russia has shed no blood. Now, of course, there's some civil war situation kind of emerging where the Kiev government is solidly backed by the West. I mean, the West doesn't even have the good sense of cautioning Poroshenko's government, which is totally dependent on the West, to behave himself internally in a way that he doesn't target the civilian population, etc., etc. And then, of course, I won't agree that China vis-a-vis us conducts itself on the basis of diplomatic norms or rules or whatever else. It is because of their claims on Indian territory, which they keep repeating aggressively, and because of what is happening on the border. So I think China's conduct in South China Sea simply cannot be compared to what Russia has been forced to do in the Ukraine. Finally, one or two points about this Goldman Sachs and this and that. This is a way of denigrating BRICS, simply because some US investment bank thought of it, and then leaders of these 5 major countries were inspired by this to come together. It's not the case at all. I'm telling you that the whole thing, what I mentioned in my earlier remarks, started with the Russian desire to expand the RIC, the Russia-India-China dialogue, because they felt that the bilateral problems between India and China were limiting the scope of this trilateral dialogue, and therefore in wanting to broaden it, to bring other countries in, and then as part of their reach out to the Latin American countries, where Brazil has a key role to play, they brought in Brazil and Russia, and South Africa, as I explained, was a later addition. With regard to some of the points made by Shri Sen, skill building, fine, but infrastructure, you said each of the countries needs to develop infrastructure. In fact, China has made absolutely remarkable progress in developing its own infrastructure, which is now world class. I think the country that badly needs development of infrastructure is India. And with regard to PPP, I can't see Russia and China, which sort of in their own ways, Russia has more of a private sector than China possibly has, getting attracted to the idea of PPP. Finally, anti-Americanism. So I was actually BRICS is not anti-American because we are speaking under the aegis of the Indo-American Friendship Association.
That is a compliment.
So I think that says it all. Now we'll have a question and answer session.
25 minutes.